Today, our story is about a famous incident that happened in a cave, and the reason for its great fame is a photo taken during that event. If you don't know anything about this photo and see it now, it will seem scary, strange, and meaningless to you. But when you learn the full story and the events that happened, the shock will be very big for you. This photo will be shown at the end of today's video, along with a new episode about people who entered places no human can enter, and see what happened to them when they entered those forbidden places. This is my Facebook account, guys. If you want to add me, you'll find the link in the description and pinned in the first comment below the video. Now, let's get started. How are you all? I hope you're always well. On January 30th, 1925, there was a 37-year-old man named Floyd Collins. He was walking in a large forest in the middle of Kentucky inside a national park. As he walked, his shoes passed over melting snow and mud on the ground beneath him, and he could hear the sound of dripping water between the trees due to the melting snow. The weather that day was warmer than previous days, and he was trying to take advantage of this nice weather to go for a walk. After walking a little on the muddy and wet path, the trees around him started to thin out, and his path began to widen until he reached the end of the tree line, where there was a large empty area. In this empty area, the path continued a little, and at its end was the opening of a very large cave on the side of a rocky hill. Without hesitation, Floyd came out from between the trees into the sunlight, walked the rest of the passage until he reached the cave opening, and stood smiling as he admired it. This opening was the entrance to a cave known as Sand Cave. Floyd had spent the past week coming here and exploring the cave, but his plan for today was to enter the deepest possible place inside the cave. The caves were a major tourist destination in that area, and Floyd was an experienced cave explorer, having visited caves since he was 6 years old, and he knew that most of Sand Cave had not yet been fully explored. His goal was to enter and explore all the different parts of the cave, draw a map of it, and make sure it was safe, so that he could bring people or visitors here and take them on guided tours or sightseeing. Floyd left the muddy passage he was walking on and entered the large cave entrance, which was very wide, about 66 meters across inside the rocky hill, and the ceiling height allowed him to stand. But inside it was completely dark. Although the entrance was open and wide, it quickly turned into a narrow passage leading down to other tunnels underground. Many of these side tunnels had already been discovered. While Floyd was walking in the large entrance carrying his oil lamp, he began mentally preparing himself for what he was about to do, which would be a terrifying experience for anyone with claustrophobia. Even if they were an experienced cave explorer, Floyd reached the end of the large entrance where it connected to the rest of the cave and started walking inside. The passage wasn't very narrow. He could stand and move freely, but the ceiling was a bit low and the passage was about 4.5 meters long. At the end of this passage, there was a square opening in the ground. Floyd had known since the previous week that the real exploration of the cave began after this opening. When you enter the opening body first, you have to crawl on your hands and knees and continue walking while cramped inside dark, narrow passages that resemble a maze. And you keep walking, not knowing where you will end up, because the cave contains areas that haven't been explored yet. This is why Floyd loved these caves and enjoyed exploring them, because he lived the spirit of adventure and risk in them. Floyd placed his lamp on the ground in front of the opening and began entering feet first. After reaching the stable ground beneath, at about 1.5 meters deep, he grabbed the lamp and pulled it with him inside the tight space, bent his head, and started looking around. He found a tunnel to his right that he could enter, which clearly branched into other tunnels. He placed the lamp on the ground ahead of him and started entering that tunnel. After a while, he reached a fork resembling a pitchfork, and the fork branched into very narrow tunnels. The previous week, Floyd had entered some of these tunnels and drawn a map for them, but there was one tunnel among the fork's branches that was very narrow, perhaps the narrowest of them all, but it looked long and open. He entered it head first, without knowing where it would lead. He thought if he entered this tunnel head first and got stuck inside, he wouldn't be able to turn his body and come back. But Floyd was very brave and entered the tunnel that could be a nightmare for anyone else. The way he moved in the narrow tunnels was by holding the lamp ahead of him and his hands above his head, then crawling his body forward and pushing the lamp ahead. This is exactly what he did inside the narrow tunnel. The tunnel was so narrow against his body that he couldn't breathe well because the tunnel walls pressed against his chest. But after some time, the ceiling began to rise a little until he reached a slightly wider area that allowed him to kneel and catch his breath at their resting point. At this point, he was 17 meters underground, and with the oil lamp he carried, he could see that the tunnel extended further and further down. Floyd hoped that this tunnel would eventually lead to a large underground chamber with enough space to stand and move around. Such large underground chambers were major tourist attractions, not only because they give a feeling of another world underground, but also because these chambers are often full of Native American artifacts, the American Indians, and these artifacts could be a great source of income for Floyd because he could advertise that this cave is full of rich history. Anyway, after taking a breath and resting a bit at that point, he started continuing to crawl inside the narrow tunnel. Although the ceiling started to become very tight above his head, the walls around him began to widen slightly, which meant he could turn his body and return if he wanted. As he moved, he noticed the lamp's light started to weaken, which meant the time was very close for anyone else who might be there. Even if they were experienced, this would be a nightmare. But for Floyd, he wasn't worried about moving in the dark because he was experienced and confident he could find his way out easily, even in the dark, simply by feeling the walls with his hands. However, he knew that moving in the cave in the dark was very dangerous and should be avoided. He decided he must return to the surface and continue exploring the next day. The place he was in was wide from the sides, so he could turn his body while holding the lamp in his hands. As he twisted his body, he lay on his back instead of his stomach, with his head facing the tunnel opening above and his feet below as he lay on his back. The oil lamp he had was above his head, and he could move his arms easily to the sides because the place was wide on the sides there. but his face was close to the ceiling, so he turned his head to the side. In this position, he started crawling on his back upwards, pushing his body from below with his heels while pushing the lamp with his hands upwards. He kept moving like this for a while. He was making good progress and was on his way to the wide area where he had rested earlier. But while crawling upwards, he made a big mistake by pushing the lamp too hard. The lamp hit something solid and broke, and the light suddenly went out. He found himself in complete darkness. Floyd wasn't afraid of the darkness inside the cave, but he knew this was a bad sign. He told himself to stay calm because he knew his location inside the cave. All he needed was to reach the small opening or pocket where he could catch his breath. Then continue to the square opening in the ceiling to get out to the surface and finish. Although his lamp was broken and dark, Floyd continued to push the unlit lamp above his head, crawling with his legs and using his hands to move backward inside the tunnel. Before he reached the small opening or pocket in the tunnel where he could kneel, he suddenly heard the sound of falling rocks beneath his feet. Of course, the darkness was intense and he couldn't see anything. Floyd held himself and hoped the falling rocks wouldn't hit him. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his left leg. A rock weighing about 13 kilograms had fallen from the low ceiling and landed on his left ankle. At first, Floyd felt relieved that the rock had only fallen on his left leg. His left leg was in a low part of the cave floor, so the rock fell there first and settled on his ankle, which was protected by that low part of the ground. Floyd thought he was lucky that the rock hadn't fallen on his head or chest. Otherwise, he would have died instantly. After catching his breath and calming down a little, he tried with all his might to pull his left leg out from under the rock, but his leg wouldn't move. He tried reaching the rock with his hands to move it, but although the cave around him was wide, the narrowest part of the tunnel prevented him from bending his body in any direction to reach the rock with his hands. Floyd was trapped underground, unable to move in total darkness. The cave ceiling was pressing on his chest, and he knew it was unstable because it had started to collapse. Since a rock had already fallen, more could fall and bury him alive. Although this was the worst nightmare anyone could face, Floyd told himself to remain calm, knowing the situation was difficult. He told himself people would notice his absence and know he was inside Sand Cave, and they would try to search for him and rescue him. He decided to wait. He was trapped in painful darkness for 30 hours. He was just waiting for rescue. Finally, he heard a voice coming from the cave entrance. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard in his life. It was not just the voice of a stranger coming to help. It was the voice of his brother Homer, who was also an experienced cave explorer. Homer reached the place where Floyd was and saw his brother's head about 1¼ meters away. They didn't talk much. Homer immediately took his lamp and gave it to Floyd and gave him some sandwiches and water he had with him. Homer told Floyd that he didn't have enough tools to rescue him right now, but that he would return to the surface, bring more men, and then come back to rescue him. Floyd thanked his brother and felt relieved. Homer left alone after 15 hours, meaning Floyd had been trapped for 45 hours. Homer's plan was to rescue Floyd by chiseling the surrounding rocks to widen the tunnel so he could pull his brother out. After 8 hours of continuous work with hammer and chisel, Homer continued bringing food and water and talked with Floyd so they wouldn't feel the long hours of waiting. But in the end, Homer couldn't continue digging. He was exhausted and needed rest, food and drink. The progress was good, but not enough to get his brother out. The narrow angle of the tunnel where Homer was digging was very tight. He was lying on his side, breaking rocks. After 8 hours of digging, Homer promised his brother he would bring more men the next day to continue digging. But during the next 50 hours, Floyd remained trapped in that tunnel with the rock that fell on his leg, while his brother brought more men to try to rescue him. But their progress was very slow. Floyd kept losing consciousness repeatedly, then regaining it. Then he began to suffer hallucinations, unable to distinguish between reality and imagination. He told his brother he felt the cave opened above him and saw angels riding golden chariots with glowing wheels coming to rescue him. He started smelling delicious food aromas, but suddenly returned to reality, realizing he was still trapped in the dark. After that, his mental and physical condition deteriorated. Outside, people began worrying about him. After 130 hours of being trapped, things got worse for Floyd. He heard the sound of running water above him, then the sound of falling rocks again. He realized that a collapse had happened inside the cave. When the sound stopped, he realized the falling rocks had blocked the rescuer's path to him. He had no choice but to pray for a miracle to save him. Indeed, as expected, the collapses blocked the tunnel in front of the rescuers. They had to start digging a completely new tunnel next to the tunnel where Floyd was trapped. Imagine that the new tunnel would be bigger than the old one they had been trying to widen. And indeed, they made this new tunnel. After several days, finally, on February 16th, 1925, and after 17 days of Floyd being trapped in the cave, the rescue team reached him. But they were very late. The team leader looked at Floyd's body, then at the other men, and said he was already dead. It turned out that after the last collapse that blocked the tunnel, rocks kept falling on him until a big rock hit his head or chest and killed him. Imagine being trapped in a dark cave all those days, buried alive, with rocks constantly falling on you, not knowing when your fate would come. Floyd remained trapped in a dark cave, while rocks repeatedly fell on him until he was buried alive and died before the last collapse. Floyd's body was removed from Sand Cave, but was not buried. Instead, it became a famous tourist attraction in another cave for many years due to media coverage of the failed rescue operation. For decades, tourists came to see Floyd's body placed in a coffin inside that second tourist cave. Eventually, the coffin was removed and Floyd was properly buried in a cemetery. This is the whole story. If you like the story or the video, please press like and share it on all your social media accounts. See you in the next episode with new stories. Goodbye.